Hi and welcome again to this video. I thought today we'd take a look at what this government is really all about and how it is we've landed ourselves in such a mess. Now, we've all heard of the kamikaze pilots, but I wondered if this could explain the path of self-harm that the UK is embarked upon and supported by the likes of the Express, the Telegraph, the Mirror, whatever. Now, as it isn't really fair just to blame those Murdoch rags, I thought we should delve a little deeper into the psychological triggers that are actually internally wired into each and every one of us. So here we go. Now, given that over the last 30 years or so, we've been bombarded with stories of bendy bananas and coloured rhubarb, Cornish pasties, I think which was Bojo's speciality pieces when he wrote as the EU reporter in the Spectator. I asked myself, could this be the main reason or simply just one of the contributing factors to the decision to leave the EU? Now, having looked at how society has been affected by the austerity measures taken over, say, the last 20 years or so, it's obvious that the scene was kind of right, the scene was set for that anti-EU propaganda. Unfortunately, this propaganda, which is in the main part crap, was weaponized by those in Westminster who recognized that somewhere in the murky waters of the corridors of power there lay a golden opportunity to A, secure power for at least a couple of elections, and B, create the perfect scenario to reward all their patrons and mates from the gentlemen's clubs of Mayfair. But how could these select few rely on a tactic of just misinformation alone to secure possession of number 10? Well, basically, let's say, seemingly they had no control over social media. They needed a specialist to overcome that particular obstacle, and they found that solution, as you all know, with Mr. Dominic Cummings. Now, love him or hate him, the choice is entirely yours. I have my own opinion, but it cannot be denied that he was the master of publicity, and he knew how to keep people in line. But why did it work so effectively? Again, people aren't completely stupid, and I needed to do a little bit more research. What of the research? I mean, what part of the equation did so many of us miss? How was it that so many were taken in by so few for so long? More importantly, why is it that we have not recognized the truth, or they have not even recognized the truth yet? Then it came to me, and I am being really very genuine here. I have a genuine theory behind this. I thought of it when I was listening back to an ex-Conservative politician called Rory Stewart. If you have a chance to look him up, I assure you, a brilliant speaker, who said basically that he would, and subsequently did, resign from the Conservative Party if Bojo was elected. But it wasn't the bloke himself or any individual speak that triggered my eureka moment. It is where he is now working as a senior fellow, which is at Yale's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs. Now, you see, at Yale University was and continues to undertake studies that are pivotal to understanding of what makes the human brain thinks. Why does it act sometimes in direct conflict? We don't know. To you and I, we know it as the Milgram Experiment. And after half a century of study, the UK has become another embodiment of that now famous and scientifically, technical term here, dead balls accurate study. A full century after the experiment probed the nature of the destructive obedience to authority, which was in the Nuremberg trials, the UK was faced with the unsettling question of Brexit. And I have a link in the description, by the way, to this. You see, When people are subjected to hundreds, if not thousands, of newspaper articles, comedic jibes, misdirection, an orchestrator of professional charlatans who were being conducted not in plain sight on a visible podium, but from behind the curtains at the side of the stage, whispering in the ear, people stood very little chance. They were being enchanted by the message of glory and prosperity. They could only see the rise and further rise of the UK at the inevitable expense of somebody else, notably the EU, by the way. The message was reinforced every single day in almost every single newspaper by every single person in authority, because if you didn't say the right thing, you didn't get into the newspapers. Now, you agree to this. Vote Brexit and we will deliver the gains because we will be in charge. You believe us, don't you? Then just carry out your duty and we will do the rest. And so the Milgram experiment once again proved to be 100% accurate. I mean, could it be that simple? Well, yes it can. Yes it was. Yes it still is. And it will probably be like that till time immemorial. Because that's what the Milgram experiment was all about. How people reacted to authority. You see, the scientific and incontrovertible results of that Milgram experiment clearly explains why people who voted to cut off their own economic prosperity can still justify their decision. Conformity to the decision of the person in charge was common in more than 80% of the participants of that experiment. And it was a big experiment. And they mostly continued to inflict pain beyond the threshold of a simple electric shock. But the plot thickens. The only variant was the quantity and intensity of the pain they inflicted on their fellow participants. They all inflicted pain on some poor schmuck who was an actor, of course. So these test subjects, just like the voters of the last 5 years, were led like lambs to the slaughter and they never stood a chance. Never stood a chance. The scientific conclusion, this isn't hearsay, this is fact, that less than 5% of the participants, who we must remember had thought they were inflicting pain on another innocent person simply because they got a question wrong, did not feel responsible, but only felt remorse for their actions, even after meeting their supposed victim. They simply pointed at the person in the room with the authority and said, "He told me I should do it, he told me to do it, but it's not my fault, his fault." Their own startling realization of their absolute complicity in inflicting pain on others only became evident when they themselves discovered it, either from the people conducting the experiment or from the person who was supposed to be receiving the electric shocks. That's the only way they would believe it. Now, the experiment was designed to see how easy was it for an authoritarian figures to influence and dictate most normal people. How did Hitler do it? How did he turn a nation of normal people into, a rampaging mob? How did he do that? That's what the Milgram Experiment was designed to find out. It explained to me how normal, rational, and otherwise law-abiding people of very good moral grounding have thought, and mostly still think today, that so long as the person in authority told them that that this is the way, this is your duty, this is the thing, vote for Brexit, that they were admonished of all responsibility, no matter the outcome. That's what we learned from it. They still mostly choose to stand behind their decision because someone, just like the respected editors and politicians and journalists and celebrity business moguls, told them that to vote for Brexit was a vote for hope. To vote for Brexit was a vote for their children. And just as in the Milgram experiment, they did what they were told to do by the people in authority. But what now? When they get together, sharing doesn't fix the root cause of the problem itself. It only lessens the psychological burden. Many in the UK have shared their problems, such as unemployment, lack of prospects, lack of respect and such like, and felt better about themselves, even if only temporarily. But just as in the Milgram experiment, large swathes of the population have not yet recognized that by simply following instructions, they themselves have created a whole bunch of other problems and to which a solution is required. They themselves have inflicted pain. And just as that Yale study found, unless and until the politicians, news media, advocates of Brexit be honest with the British people and tell them they were misled and therefore are not personally liable for the mistake that the voters made, the UK cannot progress. Because society is clearly divided and could argue is becoming more hostile than ever witnessed before in peacetime. And I do believe that. Until that self-realization happens, the majority of lemmings feel fine because A, they are secure in the knowledge that they only did what they were told to do, and B, that none of those politicians, news media and other advocates have said otherwise. So all will be well if you just believe a little bit more for a little bit longer. Now, however, the cracks have begun to form and those cracks are widening. What I find quite interesting is that A, how have they formed? And B, why, will it switch on people's cognitive ability? When there are many empty shelves in supermarkets, people notice. When the pound is worth 20% less than it was on the last Spanish holiday, people notice. When people learn that very large supermarket companies such as Tesco, Sainsbury's, etc. are announcing publicly that food supply chain is in serious jeopardy and shortages are a very real reality, people take notice. If you can't buy normal root vegetables, let alone UK grown vegetables, and then see media reports of food rotting in the ground, people take notice. When Boris gets called out on the vaccine program, which today is just slightly better than the rest of the EU nations, but a death rate that is mind-blowingly tragic, people are going to notice. Eventually, and I hope very soon, somebody is going to break ranks and going to tell the truth to those people. They're going to tell the truth that they've had fake nationalist propaganda impregnated into their very DNA for the last 20 years, with Bojo front and center of it, but only for his own personal gain, just like everything else he does. Because as we know, beyond any doubt, that until people or institutions are open and honest about their complicity in this tragic fraud, the voters will simply stand and wait for the next whistle to go once more over the top, only to face further carnage. But all crying in unison, let's make the UK great again.